Set. Okay, it's 6 o'clock on August 21st, 2023, and I will call this meeting of the Chelmsford Select Board to order. Please, would you join me and stand for the pledge? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, we have a big agenda tonight, so hopefully we can move through this crisply. First, public service announcements.
Okay, we have several this evening. First is the Chelmsford Military Community Covenant Task Force invites the community to a public 9/11 Remembrance Ceremony that will be held on Saturday, September 9th, 2023 at 9 a.m. at the 9/11 Memorial right in front of the Chelmsford Fire Headquarters. There will be a guest speaker who is a recently retired Lieutenant Colonel from the Air Force who will speak about how 9/11 has impacted him and his career in the military. And I have several announcements from the Board of Health. First is a free six-week meditation series with instructor Chris Connolly. This free series of meditation will be held at the Chelmsford Center for the Arts Cabaret Room every Wednesday from 3:30 to 4:30 p.m. from September 6th through October 7th. They do ask you to register with the Chelmsford Board of Health. You're also invited to a karaoke sober edition starting September 8th, also at the Chelmsford Center for the Arts Cabaret Room. This is going to be a continuing event the second Friday of every month. Snacks will be available for purchase, and there also will be mocktails available for purchase. Next, the Chelmsford Board of Health will have their annual candlelight vigil for substance use disorder awareness. This will be on the town common on Saturday, September 16th. At 6:30, you can come and sign the name of a loved one that you have lost to substance use disorder, and then at 7 p.m. the event begins, including the reading of those names. Soberfest will be also sponsored by the Health Department on September 16, 2023, from 1 to 5 p.m. on the Chelmsford Town Common. Included will be an option for you to learn how to administer Narcan in 5 minutes. No registration is needed for this, and you'll also get a free Narcan Rescue take-home kit if you go through that training. And finally, the Board of Health is sponsoring a free residential medical sharps disposal to keep the sharps out of the trash. The drop-off location will be at the Chelmsford Health Department at 50 Billrica Road. Drop-off dates, September 11th, December 11th this year, and then next year there will be several dates, which we'll have announcements of those prior to those dates. Drop-off hours are 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. Important to remember, there's one-time registration required. These are residential sharps only. Sharps must be in a hard plastic container with a secure lid. The container must be clearly labeled as containing sharps, and it should be at least 3/4 full. Again, that's the next time for that will be September 11th from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. Thank you.
Okay, next segment is public input. If there's anybody that wishes to speak in here or in the Zoom room. Okay, seeing none, we'll move to committee vacancies.
Okay, as of today, we have the following vacancies. There's one vacancy on the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee, one vacancy on the Board of Assessors, 3 vacancies on the Commission on Disabilities, 1 vacancy on the Community Action Program Committee, 2 vacancies on the Council on Aging Board, 3 vacancies on the Cultural Council, 1 vacancy on the Holiday Decorating Committee. The Parade Committee welcomes all applicants. Roberts Field Advisory Committee has 2 vacancies, and the Tree Committee has 1 vacancy. If you're interested in applying for any of these vacancies, you can fill out an application online, available at the town website, or through the town manager's office.
Thank you, Pat. Next, Representative Elliott is up to request for sound barriers along Route 3 southbound near Smith Street.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the Select Board. Thank you for allowing me to come before you this evening. I appear before you tonight relative to sound barriers that I've been working on with residents on Smith Street. I'd say it was about 2 months ago, Kathleen Brialt had reached out to me relative to sound barriers in the Smith Street neighborhood, which would be essentially from the southbound side of Route 3. I think the letter says to Stedman, Parkhurst to Stedman. I have gone out and taken some measurements or used mile markers as an area of concern. I plan on writing a letter to the Secretariat, Secretary Fiandaca, Mass Department of Transportation. However, before I did so, I wanted to come before you and just notify you of the communications that I have had with Ms. Brialt, along with 106 signatures from residents in the area. They've signed a petition requesting Mass DOT construct sound barriers along the Smith Street corridor of Route 3 southbound. So merely informational. I know this is a long process. There is a noise abatement procedure that I know I did speak to the town manager and select board person, Virginia Crockett-Timmons, as well. I know it's a long process, but I think this is going to just the first step, and I wanted to come before you and get input, thoughts, concerns before I did send a letter, and I will ask members of the delegation to sign that letter as well.
Quick question, what's the construction and appearance of the proposed barriers?
I don't know at this point. I mean, I'm going to presume, I've traveled a number of times and I've seen the sound barriers that have been installed previously in Chelmsford and the area. I presume they will be of similar nature to be consistent, but I don't know that. Okay. I don't know that question, the answer to that question.
Yeah, we did have a similar situation, must have been 12 years ago at least, along like the Scotty Hollow section of Route 3, and it took a while, but we were successful. So
right.
It just sometimes takes persistence.
I'm sure. Yeah, I'm sure this is not the only request throughout the state. I've had some preliminary conversations with some representatives at DOT, and it is a long process because there is let's say the assessment process, and that they will come out and I'm sure that's the first step. But this was the first step for me to come before you and let you know the concerns from the residents and what I plan to do from my end with the state and Mass DOT.
Could you provide us with a copy of the letter that you do send?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
I'm happy to share it before, just to take a look at it. But it, or Mr. Manager, I don't know if you can dig one up from 12 years ago in your microfiche. But
Well, the request was well before I was.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, it was right before. It was when.
It was probably 18 years.
It was when
or so.
Deval Patrick was running for governor, and he came here and he promised he would do it.
Sure.
And I don't remember if it was done during his first term or not, but second term. Okay.
So that's going.
I mean, generally speaking, it just outlines the number of vehicles and how, I do have some traffic data. I think it's well over 100,000 vehicles that travel Route 3 in that particular stretch every day. So volume has increased, and to me, it has an effect on the residents of that neighborhood. And I'm happy to share that letter.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I don't feel like I have much value to add in a review cycle, but my thought was at least give us the letter that goes out in case somebody from the state picks up the phone and calls, we'll know what they're looking at.
Agreed. Happy to do that as soon as I get it.
Any other questions or comments, or Representative Elliott? Okay, thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for your time. Good evening.
Okay, next up is public hearings, continuation of National Grid double pole hearing in accordance with Chapter 142, Section 37 of the Code of the Town of Chelmsford. And who is with us tonight from National Grid?
I'm here tonight. My name is Joy Banks.
Good evening, Curtis Davis, Community and Customer Management with National Grid.
Okay. And is there anyone else that might be joining in as well?
No, I think it's just the two of us today.
Okay. So,
My name is Joy Banks. I am the manager of outdoor lighting and attachments. I manage all distribution wood poles and all things attached to them, all the wires, antennas, cameras, and the like. And I know I've been working with customer and community for better than 4 months now, tried to get our arms around the Chelmsford double pole concerns that you have. And I put an action plan in place with the business to, first of all, a lot of these double poles, when I go in to look at the set dates, a little longer than I would like to see them. Certainly this issue is not singular to the town of Chelmsford, city of Chelmsford. You know, we manage 179 municipalities across Massachusetts, and we do report out to the department on double poles in the aging report in conjunction with Verizon. I know Stan's on from Verizon. And for this particular situation, we had our operations team and all our trouble workers in their downtime go out, take a look at these aging National Grid transfers that were required. I think somebody on this call might be Town Manager Cohen, may have spoken with Manuela Cronstrom about some of the National Grid work. Then we have, you know, that mid-tier where we have Comcast and RCN, Crown Castle, and many, many other attachers, we reference them as, to remediate and push them to manage some of their poll work. Then, as you know, there is another section where the town has some municipal wire that was not marked as such. And when the poles aren't tagged like that, when the wires aren't tagged, the contractors that National Grid uses to do the pole replacements may not know that it's police or fire wire, and they tag it as non-participating third party, which always is going to require a little bit more investigation. So I sent one of my operations folks out, Mr. D'Amico. I believe he met with the lieutenant at the fire department, and then also with your IT services folks to identify that there was I think only a dozen or so that were city of Chelmsford. With those poles, I think there's still a bit of a question. We see a couple of emails that say that you've transferred, but have you transferred since Rocco D'Amico was out boots on the ground, which I think was on the 10th of August? If the answer is yes, then Curtis and I will do some work tomorrow to push those tickets to Verizon. We have Stan on the call. I also have my own contacts at Verizon that I can reach out to. Stan, Stephanie Magnan, Roland Fortin would be who I'd be reaching out to push those tickets along a little bit more expediently. I don't know who you go to within Verizon, but we have a very good relationship with Verizon. Double poles is a biggie. We're doing a lot of work on the North Shore and all over the state of Massachusetts. It's not just capital work. It's distribution generation. We're updating some substations. We have a massive amount of work going on. And because all that work overlaps, oftentimes the transfers don't get done on a first in, first out basis. That being said, this situation for the town of Chelmsford has gone all the way to the top of the house, literally. And I'm meeting with our CEO and our vice president this week to come up with a remediation plan for not just Chelmsford, but for other towns and municipalities, all towns in Massachusetts. to, to develop some more communications, to push the attachers, whether it's the cable companies, all the comms, the wireless companies with the antennas, flags, cameras, you name it, flower pots, all those things, streetlights, can hold up our transfers before Verizon can actually do their work. And while we are joint pole owners together, we don't always we can't just move their wires for them. We don't have permission to do that. So we kind of poke them when issues arise. And again, I am working on a kind of a new process for that, so that perhaps on a monthly basis, I could pull by attacher and be more aggressive when there's non-participating codes and engines, because you don't know what you don't know. If it isn't routing to you, right, how would you be the wiser that your muni wire had to be moved, right? So I think that National Grid has a little bit of work to be done in that department, and things are underway. We started some training classes on engines for all of our attachers in our municipalities. We started doing some roadshows out west. It was very enlightening to find out when we were out west with emergency planning that there were folks that are receiving the engines tickets that have been long retired for months. And so I think we get a lot of some cleanup work to be done across the state. We will focus on Chelmsford. It will remain our focus until this is cleaned up. I know we just did a big project where we did 300 pole replacements. By looking at your report, I think that the business is managing the new stuff. It's some of the old stuff that really needs a push. So I'm going to stop there. I could talk all day, but just for your feedback, and then maybe Stan could talk a little bit about Verizon.
Sure. I don't know if you can hear me or not. But,
Perfectly.
Excellent. In terms of
Stan,
the non-participant, yes.
Could you give us your full name, please?
Yeah, Stan Yusevich, Verizon, with offices at 63 High Street in Danvers.
Great, thank you.
And thank you for all the work that National Grid has done. I just went on and opened up the Ninjins report, and there seems to be quite a few transfers that have ended up in Comcast can, almost 100, which means that we'll be next up to bat. There are two currently in the Verizon queue that have been in for just only 2 days. But having said all that, also just to follow up on the non-participating third party, Paul, if you've identified that there are strands or fibers that are the towns, I'll send you the contact at Mengens, and you can go, enlist whomever you would like to get the notifications for those cables from Mengens. There's no cost to the community. And I think what was inferred and clearly needs to be stated that despite the ownership being jointly owned between Grid and ourselves, the responsibility for transfer is a joint responsibility. So the more information that we can get to you, the better in my mind. But I see nearly 100 that will be coming our way very shortly. And I'll alert operations that they will be in for quite a bit of work in Chelmsford.
Yeah, and Curtis and I talked briefly before the call. He does have a contact at Comcast who, obviously this is her area of, operations. But I also have several contacts at Comcast that I meet with every Friday, and I will reach out to them this week and let them know we really need a push here to clean this up because, Verizon's last to go, right? To Stan's point, right? They're all on Comcast court right now, And that's something new, Stan, that they've been moving, slowly but surely. And nonetheless, once Comcast does their sweep, Verizon's going to have quite a bit of work to do to remove the poles.
Yeah, exactly. And I think our guys are charged with trying to remove them within a certain amount of time, and they're judged by that. But letting operations know that there is going to be a flurry of activity in Chelmsford. I'll do that tomorrow morning.
And just to speak to those 100 polls that are in Comcast court
Curtis.
right now.
Curtis,
Yes.
could you just your full name, please, for the recording
Absolutely.
secretary?
Curtis Davis with National Grid.
Thanks.
So on those about roughly 100 reports that is with Comcast next to go, those stemmed from the Chelmsford number 9 project, and those double pole tickets have been getting put into engines, and obviously a large chunk of them were put in the other day. I did send Kerry Moore as my contact over at Comcast. She's manager with their government affairs. I sent her an email just letting her know that a bunch have been added to Comcast, just so she was aware. And Comcast has been spectacular, and so has Verizon in helping clean up these double poles the last few months. And so, no doubt in my mind that Comcast will be all over those transfers and progress those tickets as quickly as they can.
Yeah, I would reaffirm that they're generally very good.
But if they're so good, why are we here, right? So what I want to say to the team is, there's a lot of work that could still be done, particularly from a National Grid standpoint. We have a solid plan in place that I'm going to share with the business this week. Again, unless it's affiliated with a direct cable company or wireless company attacher, I don't typically get involved until there's an issue, right? The engineers in the business push those transfers along. And sometimes that paperwork, it literally is a piece of paper that the operations team is filling out. In the case of this Chelmsford number 9, I've run into this problem a few times. We have a contractor that does the massive quantities of like 300 pole sets. And when they do that, they wait till the project is over to submit those tickets. So we're working with operations to say, you know what, can we do it by street? Can we do it by week? So that Comcast doesn't get dumped and Verizon isn't getting hit, in one fell swoop, they got to go out and do all these pole removals. So I do have some work to do. And I feel like it's coming a long way. We're always challenged with resources. I'm hoping to get a resource to kind of look at this engines. We are managed. I report out to the department, as does my counterpart at Verizon. So we do try to keep up with our own transfers. It's all those things in the middle that are so very problematic. So one thing that we're working on for FY24 is something called a single stream transfer process. What does that mean? It means when National Grid replaces a pole, we will have a company come in and do all the transfers on behalf of all the comms providers so that they're all done in a timely manner, all in one fell swoop, and then it will go down and drop to Verizon so that they can remove the pole butt. So there are definitely some things that we can do as a company to make this process better. The timing hasn't always been optimal, but I will say your voices have been heard. Like I said, this Chelmsford situation went all the way to our CEO, and she wants to speak with us about that and come up with a really solid plan so that we can prevent the delays in the transfers going forward.
Is that something that you feel as though you would be able to report back to us on, say, September 11th?
Not September 11th. If it was that easy, I would already have that done. It takes a lot of communications with Verizon. They are our joint pole owner. We meet with them next on September 11th. And we have kind of a subcommittee that's working on this. There's a lot of union challenges that go along with work. So anytime you're taking away union work, in those transfers in the middle there, whether it's Comcast, RCN, Crown Castle, Verizon Wireless, you're always going to run into issues where we need to work with the unions to get approval to do that work on behalf of. So that's kind of where it gets a little sticky. But
So, well, how about an update for us on the 25th of September?
yeah, I can't say it's going to be in place, that process on the 25th, but I'm happy to join. I told Curtis anytime I'll join these calls as long as I have to until these Chelmsford polls are mitigated.
What does everybody else think?
I mean, I have some comments
I have
first.
some
Oh, sure.
questions,
Go right
too.
ahead. Jump in.
Thank you for coming this evening. My name's Virginia, and I have a couple of questions. First, just a comment. I do think that with what we've been through with this, a monthly update would be appreciated, just so that we know how things are progressing. I have kind of a two-part question. My first question relates to your list, and our Department of Public Works recently spent some time after our last discussion with National Grid to try to help baseline what are all the double poles in Chelmsford, and they drove around and did an inventory. There's still a discrepancy between the list we received from National Grid and the DPW list. So my first question is, what is going to be done to resolve that discrepancy and make sure that your list is complete? And then my second question is, there are double poles on here that were missing, and I still are, that weren't created, 10 years ago. They were created within the last few years, and one of the things that I asked at the last meeting is, can you, at some point, as you're looking at this process, not only how to eliminate the double poles that we have, but what are you going to put in place to ensure that you're not missing when double poles are created? Because it's astounding how many more double poles that our DPW organization found that weren't even on your list yet. So to me, that says there's something earlier on in the process that's broken, where you're not getting the double poles entered into your inventory. And so I'd like to know those two things. When are we going to get the list reconciled, and what are we doing to make sure we don't wind up in this position again where we don't even know what we're trying to address?
I love that. I didn't get your name though. I'd love to.
My name's Virginia. My name is Virginia Timmons.
Thank you, Virginia. So two great questions. I am a Lean Six Sigma practitioner, so I'm very process driven. I do a lot of work with National Grid to the business to look at end-to-end process and see where these gaps are happening. I talked with Curtis, as I said before our call, and for the past couple of weeks. We are going to take those two lists. What's happening, and I just from my experience, what I think is happening is that piece of paper ticket is getting lost somewhere between operations in the clerks that input those tickets into the engine system. Now, I've been down to visit the clerks. I've ran into cases over the years where somebody retired and there was a drawer full of tickets. I've been places where somebody was out on disability and their tickets weren't being managed properly because they were out. There's a lot of different reasons that could happen, but it all boils down to a piece of paper that doesn't get into engines somewhere between operations and the clerks. So if we, and I think, Curtis, you said we have that list. Is that
Yes,
the list with 141 polls that we looked at?
Yes, we do have the list from the DPW director from their internal audit, and we'll be working to make sure all the double polls on that list coincide with the engines report. But again, a vast majority of those double polls were from the Chelmsford number 9 project, and the forms had just not yet been entered into engines.
So we'll look at the list. This is our plan. We did talk about this a little before we got on the call. We're going to put the list together, see where the discrepancies lie. We'll go back to operations for the number 9 project. I will have somebody personally on my team do that input into engines if need be, right? We could get that done in lickety-split. And once those transfers start, pushing out to the different comms companies, we could get that over to Verizon. But there could also be things outside of the project, right? That they could be old, they could be new. We don't know. We'd have to look at the set dates and see what that looks like. It's going to take a little investigation, but Virginia, it's on my mind. And I think, like I say, I do not own the engines process. I own the relationship with engines, and I schedule trainings and things like that with the business. Clearly, there is a lot of work, whether it's capital work, DG work, substation upgrades, whatever the case might be, that is not in my purview. So I'm not watching those tickets the way that I watch the comms tickets when they want to attach to our polls. So, like I say, my vice president reached out to me on Friday. She wants to set up a call to look at this process from end to end with our CEO. We're going to brainstorm some ideas and see where we need to put some gatekeeping in place so that when the business, my idea is this: I can run a report every month that tells me how many poles National Grid replaced. Then the question is, how many tickets are coming out at the other end? And those numbers should be very close. I'm going to suspect they're not. But nobody is managing that, I guess, for a lack of a better term. So we're going to put some metrics in place, some measurements to tell us how many polls are being set, how many tickets are coming in, how long are these tickets taking to get into engines, so that we can tighten up this process. And we will look at your list with the 141. Curtis shared that with me prior to the call this week. And what I think we're going to do is manually input tickets on behalf of, to close that gap there and start fresh.
Okay.
I think I answered both your questions. If I haven't, let me know.
Okay, I have a few things. This is Pat.
Hi, Pat.
First of all, I'm going to read something from our meeting minutes from our July 24th meeting, which Susan Griffin attended. Almost the last paragraph says, following discussion, it was agreed that the hearing would be continued to the board's meeting on August 21st, which is today, and an updated report by either Mr. Davis or Ms. Griffin. Vice Chair Wojcik asked that the report be supplied to the board at least by Wednesday before the scheduled meeting, as required by board policy, to ensure adequate time for its review prior to the meeting. That was not done. I mean, Susan Griffin basically promised that would be done, that the report would be to us. I mean, it came sometime this afternoon. I have not even looked at it because it came today. Everybody else who wants to have a report on our meeting to be reviewed submits it to be in our packet the Wednesday before our meeting, and I'm disappointed that didn't happen. And also, Ms. Griffin, when she was here, I had asked her about making a good faith effort on the 55 polls that had been identified at that point, to have those removed by today. She practically promised, I don't know if anybody else remembers her exact words, but she practically promised that almost all those 55 polls would be removed. I do not know if they are, because like I said, I haven't looked at the report that came today. And as I said, I'm disappointed that I did not have a chance to look at that report today.
Yeah.
Pat, I just want to touch a little bit about the double poll report. I did send a double poll report on Wednesday of last week, and a communication to Manager Cohen.
That's it.
And I did explain to him that, we're still processing tickets into engines, so that report can be different as by the time we got to Monday. And I explained that I would just provide an updated double poll report for any tickets that had been entered between Wednesday, when I submitted that first double poll report, until today prior to the call. So my apologies.
Okay, well, wait a minute. That report, if it's the one I'm looking at, is dated 7/20.
There's another spreadsheet, that's the report that's in the packet. That's just there for reference.
Okay.
There was another, the detailed spreadsheet is different
Okay.
than what we had last time.
Okay,
But then another update came in today.
right. Another update did come in today, and, okay.
And I just wanted to make sure you had the most recent double poll report prior to tonight's meeting, because again, some have been added since I sent it on Wednesday. So that was kind of my intention.
So a couple of things I'll say about that. The first thing is, if the board would like me to, I can set up an automatic report to come to you every week. I mean, I could send it every day if you want. But it doesn't change that vastly, you know what I mean? I can definitely do a report for the city of Chelmsford. We can have that go automatically to whatever emails that you designate. I cannot speak on behalf of Susan. What I will say is that I have met with her over the past couple of weeks with the business to talk about these issues with the city of Chelmsford. And while her heart may have been in the right place, we can't always make promises on behalf of operations. We have too much weather to contend with. I know myself, I had 2 deaths in the family in the past 2 weeks. So, you do the best you can, you get it out. And I apologize if she promised you something that she couldn't deliver. Unless I can put my boots on myself and do it, I'm not promising. But in light of that, I can happy to get you a report that we can send you. Curtis, that's easy. But also, you can go in and pull it anytime you want. I don't know if anybody on this call has, at the board, has any interest in even going into engines. But there should be a point person that is kind of pulling it on the regular. I also have contacts for every single attacher when something's held up for next to go, sharing that with Susan and her team so that we make sure that, we have the right people that we're reaching out to get that work done. Sometimes it's not the clerk that you want to look for. Things need to be escalated, which is how this got to me. And Stan and everyone else on this call will work egregiously to get these cleaned up for your town. The other thing I wanted to say was, we need to take a look at, one of my questions I had with that recent list that Curtis pulled, if National Grid set 300 polls for the number 9 project, then why are there only 141 tickets in the system? So we're going to look into that tomorrow and see, because that's a huge gap. Because I said, if these numbers are right, we're doing a pretty good job, right? But I would guess there's many, many tickets missing. And Curtis, we can work together on that. I have someone on my team that can help us get those tickets in quickly. You also want to make sure that we replace the non-participating party with the engines code for the town so that we can properly close those out. So if we don't properly close them out in engines with that municipal fire wire that we just remediated, then Verizon's never going to get those tickets. So they're not going to know they have to remove that pole butt until that ticket goes through. So that's another 12 on the list.
Okay.
Did we lose them?
I think National Grid's still on the call.
Apologize for that.
Yes,
Sorry for that.
Okay,
Sorry for
we
that.
apologize for that. Unfortunately, this happens from time to time, and our folks at Telemedia have been trying to do what they could to screen this properly.
It's a public hearing. Do you want to ask for if there's any more public?
Well, one question I did have is, as far as somebody being a point person.
Right, we have a point person, up until 2 months ago, it was Steve Maffetone, my assistant town manager. Now it's an official in the Department of Public Works. So we are access and active in the engine system. We also have the town as a code in the system, so we see those, and we've actively moved to have our fiber moved when we're aware of it. I think the issue that Curtis may have referenced is some of the fiber not out there, not labeled, which could create an issue where it wouldn't get assigned to the town of Chelmsford. So there may be fiber out there at a couple of locations that isn't tagged and labeled, and I don't know why that's the case, because the town has a lot of fiber in town, and that's the first I've heard of that concern. So
Paul-
go ahead, Joy.
If I missed your introduction, I'm still recovering.
Okay, sorry.
Are you Mr. Cohen?
Yes.
Did you meet with Rocky?
No.
Okay.
And I'm not, and I've got my public works director here in the room, and she's shaking her head. She's not aware of a meeting with Rocky as well.
No, I mean, unless Jack did it.
Oh, I have an
Unless it-
email I could forward to you. He was at the police and fire. He met with the IT folks.
He may have met with the IT director and the fire captain, but I did not meet him, and I didn't know
Okay.
he was here.
I may have misinterpreted his email, but nonetheless, earlier in January, National Grid, and I assume Verizon, although I didn't confirm it, I believe Eversource and many of our attachers were notified by the Department of Public Utilities that in lieu of recent storm activity, we've had many storms. 1 year, 2 years ago, we had 44 storm events that I worked personally. And there were probably more than that I didn't work. But during those events, when we do all these pole replacements, it's a real challenge, because even like Comcast, we know is Comcast. We know that Verizon is, bottom comms. We know Comcast is right above them. We know if RCN is servicing Everett area, that they're probably likely above that. We know based on looking at the cable how thick it is, the color, the tags, who owns and operates those fibers. And the Department of Public Utilities, in lieu of all the storm events that we've had, notified National Grid in January that we need to communicate on a broader level to all of our attachers on our distribution wood poles that tags need to be in place and updated to prevent delays in restoration, because National Grid can't move anyone's wires. Liability says we cannot do that. And so there are a lot of things that aren't tagged. Also, we have the situation where I have one company, first they were Eastcom, then they were Light Tower, then they were Fibertech, now they're Crown Castle. I mean, they changed the name very frequently. They're, Time Warner, right? They still have tags that say Time Warner, but those tags might be from 1989, and while the, seasoned folks in the field know that Time Warner is, they need to update the tags. So another thing that my team is working on is to kind of get a messaging out there, to have people go out and make sure their tags are in place. It may be as plain as day to the municipality, but certainly it isn't when I have contractors coming from, Canada or wherever they're coming from to restore power during storm events. They don't just know. They look for the tag. If they don't see the tag, then it goes into engines as non-participating third party, because they don't know. And during restoration, we might have 3,000 linemen coming. They're coming from all across the country. They're not familiar with our providers. So it's a challenge. The department sent a friendly reminder, quote unquote, right off the communication, but nonetheless, they put that onus on National Grid and Verizon as pole owners to get the messaging out to all the attachers to make sure that they're properly tagged.
Okay, Joy,
so-
at this
Yeah.
point, I think it might make sense is if we ask for if there's any other public input that might be waiting to discuss anything with this.
Okay.
With the
Yep.
thoughts that, once that's completed, that we would take a look at maybe continuing to
Yeah.
the 25th like we discussed.
Yeah.
So is there any?
Let's get the
Yeah,
let's get this wrapped up first. I'll come
sure.
back to you on the 11th. I'll be on the call on the 11th and the 25th
Yeah,
in
just,
case there are any updates.
just hang in there for
And,
a second. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, my question, Joy, is we realize there's two forms of errors on the list. One is double polls that aren't on the list that Virginia spoke of earlier, and then there's also the possibility that information on the list is entered incorrectly or erroneous. And I think that's the question I'd have for you is, I think we understand that the 100 polls or whatever the number is for they were installed this calendar year, really within the last 6 months on this Project 9 is fine. I think the ones that are more unsettling is the ones that you see that go back years or in some cases over a decade. And there are even a couple that are in National Grid's court, and I think those are the ones that I think are probably the ones that are more irritating to people in the community if they are real double polls, and I think if you could look and focus on those. I know it's great to get the number down, saying, okay, we've gone from 188 down to 24, but I think the ones like there's a few here that National Grid is in their court. One goes back to 2014, one's another 2016. Those are the ones that I think are the ones that cause the highest anxiety, because I think people either are totally frustrated or they've given up hope.
100%. Yeah, I'm pulling it not only for Chelmsford, I'm pulling it for the entire state. I know it's going to be hair raising, but it needs to be done, and we'll focus on Chelmsford. But I do have some plans in place. Mignola's gone out to look at those National Grid transfers. She completed several of them. That one from 214, and there's a couple of other really, really old ones, need a little remediation. So there's other work to be completed before they can fix that. But we'll keep you posted on those on the 25th.
Okay, I'd like to come back to public input.
Okay, yeah.
And see if there is anybody that'd like to speak to this.
Can I ask a quick question?
Well, can I do this first,
Yeah,
please?
sure. Yeah, of course.
Okay, thank you. Is there anybody that would like to speak regarding this topic? Okay, go ahead, Erin.
I'm just curious. Hi, Joy, Erin Drew. From a big picture perspective, I'm curious if you guys have some sort of timeline in mind for kind of cleaning up this larger list into something more, and I don't know what more manageable means, 20 or 30, but are you thinking
So
6 months, a year? Do you have a kind of goal in mind?
Well, I can put back of the napkin together. So if you have National Grid, you have 4 comms, you have an antenna on top of the pole, you have a street light, and you've got the town. And then Verizon, you multiply by 30, everybody gets 30 days.
Yeah.
So that's kind of my back of the napkin math on this.
Yeah.
I would say there's probably 4 comms plus Verizon, a street light.
So off the
6
top of your
times-
head, like 6 months to a
Yeah.
year?
I think so, but not in this case. Did you say your name was Susan?
Erin?
Erin, sorry. We're gonna get after Chelmsford. I'll take care of it.
Okay, I'll take a motion to continue this to September 25th.
Make a motion that we continue the public hearing for National Grid double poles to September 25th.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So we'll look forward to hearing from you on the 25th to see where we're at with updates. And I think that if there are any updates with reports and so forth, Paul, you'd be the obvious, point person for that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Appreciate
Thank you.
your time. Sorry for that interruption as well.
Not a problem. Have a good night.
Kind of is, but, okay.
Yeah, it really is.
Okay, next up is the National Grid Underground Conduit Petition for Charles Way.
I think that's Joseph who's on the call.
How you doing? It's Joe, Iantilli, National Grid Electric.
Okay, hi, Joe. Can I get your full
How you
name,
doing?
just for the record?
It's Joe Iantilli,
Okay,
Ientile. I'll
Thank
focus
you.
you here.
okay, do you want to give us a little background on what you're doing and so forth? And
Sure. So National Grid would like to install 2 sets of 2-3 conductor across the street to service new residential houses, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, and 12
Charles Way, yeah.
on Charles Way. We already have existing transformers and existing customers on the right side of the street going up, and this is for the left side of the street, so we're just bringing secondary wiring across to service the houses.
Yeah, and the reason we want to get this done is because we're not going to commence the paving until this conduit work gets installed, so.
We were trying to get it going as fast as we could, so.
Okay. Considering this is a public meeting, I'd like to see if there is any public input. Okay, hearing none, are there any board comments and questions?
Okay, I make a motion that we close the public hearing.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I'll make a motion to approve the underground conduit petition from National Grid, number 307-53833, as presented.
I'll second.
All those in favor? Aye, 5-0. Thank you, appreciate it.
Thank you.
Good night.
Okay, next up, licenses. Okay, we have a one-day all alcoholic beverage license, American Legion, 90 Groton Road.
They're here. They're here.
Just your name, full names, when you come up to the podium to speak. Thank you.
Al Riccio, General Manager, American Legion, Post 313.
Good evening. Phil Hamilton, Senior Commander at the American Legion, North Chelmsford.
Thank you.
Daniel Vigent, Commander of the American Legion, Post 313. Good evening. We're here before you this evening to request the one-day liquor license for our August block party to be held this Saturday, the 26th. Hopefully we don't get rained out this time. Our plan is to close down the road from Willis Drive at Groton Road to the end of our building. Willis Drive will still have access through the easement in our parking lot. We'll be using our upper parking lot for parking, as well as permission from the senior center for overflow parking.
Okay.
Any questions?
Any questions?
We do it every year.
Yep. Okay, take a motion.
I'll make a motion that we approve the one-day all alcohol beverage license for Al Riccio at the American Legion as presented.
I'll second.
All those in favor? Aye. 5-0. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hopefully it won't rain.
Thank you.
Okay, next up is the one-day all alcoholic beverages license for St. John the Evangelist African Community for 9/22 and 9/24. Is there someone here on the Zoom?
No.
Nobody?
They do
Okay.
this. They've done this before.
Right. Does anybody have any questions about the documentation they've submitted in their application? I'll take a motion then.
Okay, I'll take a motion that we approve 2 one-day all alcohol licenses for St. John's Evangelist Church on September 22nd and September 24th as presented.
I'll second.
All those in favor? Aye, 5-0. Okay, great. Next up, reports and presentations. Conservation Commission Chair Carl Bischoff on the Warren poll.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, and the Commission, and the Board. My name is Carl Bischoff. I'm the 15 Lock Road. I'm the Chair of the Conservation Commission. I'm here to give you an overview of the conservation restriction for the Warren Pole Conservation Site that is on Boston Road. It's been over 2 years we've been working on this. It's going far slower than we would like, but we are making some progress, and I'll give you some context and where we are on the progress and the next steps. So if we can go to the next slide.
Sorry.
That is not.
There we go.
There we go. So if we
Wrong
just
up.
start with the master plan, we have a 2020 master plan, and one of the major things that's important in there is that we preserve a lot of our open space and our natural resources, and so when those opportunities come up, we try to make sure that that happens. If we go to the next page, the Warren and Pole families made an offer to the town for the property that's at this site, 50 built on Boston Road, and this was around the May 2020 timeframe. This was, as the wording says there, it's protecting the nature of the property for the public, for recreation opportunities, and protect the wetlands and wildlife habitat along Putnam Brook, conservation of the site for the public. So this was an opportunity that was put forth to the town in 2020. Next page, please. The offer was then turned into a town meeting article warrant, and part of that warrant was to use, the request was to use Community Preservation Act funding, which is has requirements, which includes a perpetual restriction or a conservation restriction. So if we go to the next, and that was passed unanimously in October. That conservation restriction, which is a requirement of the Preservation Act, is it limits the purpose of the use of the property to the reason that we purchased the property. So we can't change the use of the property down the road. We can't say, oh, we bought it for conservation, but we're going to put a baseball field or a skating rink or a swimming pool or something different for the property. So we are defining what the use of the property is based on why we bought it. This is following DCS template, Department of Conservation Services in the state. So the next page, the town bought the property at the end of October, or early October, I think it was 2020, completed the acquisition, and then at that time, Paul asked us in the Conservation Commission to begin the process of working the conservation restriction with the Chelmsford Land Conservation Trust. And I thought Dale might be here tonight, and I know he's aware of the meeting. So Dale Williams is the head of the Land Conservation Trust. If you go to the next page, the restriction is, as I said, it's part of the, there's a template for this restriction. It's a document that's in the state. We're following that template. We're working with the town councils, one of Paul's lawyers in his office. We're working through this process. It is a legal document. It has to be approved by both local and state authorities, and it is recorded in the Registry of Deeds. So we're using that template, and we've been working in earnest, really in earnest, even though it's been a while. We have been working through it. So let's go to the next page. I'm not going to go through it. What I'm going to highlight here is that there is a lot of boilerplate in the document, and you can see it when you are asked to sign this in the future. It's going to be sometime this year, I hope. If it works, if everything goes right, I think it will be this year. We still have some work to do, which you'll see in a few minutes. But there is a lot of boilerplate here, and there's 3 pages of this kind of description. I will go a little bit into the purposes, the prohibited uses, and the permitted uses, but again, I'm not going to go into any detail on that. You can read it when we get to the document in the future. But this gives you an overview of what you're going to see. Most of the rest of it is state boilerplate stuff that you don't have to spend a lot of time with, in my opinion. If you go to the next page, more boilerplate. It's a 20 right now. It's at 27 pages of a document right now. Next page, more boilerplate, legal mumbo jumbo. Lot of information in there. There are some exhibits at the end that describe the property, the plan of the premises, and the changes that were made in the meantime, such as we've now got a parking area and a driveway. Go to the next page. when we talk about the purposes, this goes back to what I talked about at the beginning about the master plan, that we have values for our open space in town, and we have documented those on the left side. What's happened is we really got working on this process 2 years ago, and we kept narrowing down the details to working at a lot of detail level. And when about a month ago we stepped back and looked at the document, we realized, some of the values that we kind of skipped over at the beginning of the process really should be applied to the document. So the ones on the right, we're working through getting them incorporated, some of them incorporated into the document. So the document, we're trying to manage the control of the document between the different parties. So as it stands right now, those ones on the right are not listed in the document, but some of them will likely be put in, and we're working through that with the land trust and with the town council's office. Next page, please. Specifically, we have prohibited and permitted uses, and so on this page is the things that we're identifying, and this mostly is from the template of the document. We pick and choose what we say is prohibited. So the wording of all these is very specific in the document, and we're saying these types of things are prohibited with certain exceptions. So without going into each one here, let's move on to the next page, where we show the permitted acts and uses, and this is where we've had the discussion with the land trust on defining what we're saying is permitted. So most of those things there are permitted with a lot of wording in there, and you can read through what's of interest to you when you get a copy of the document. But these are the things that I've identified as what we are, based on what the original plan for the property was, and what we had done as an assessment of the town, having some feedback from the town with the survey we had done almost 3 years ago now on what to do with the property. So those would be the permitted acts and uses. In the next page here is very specifically, we talked about agricultural activities. We are saying that it is permitted. I want to be clear, when we say permitted, doesn't mean we're going to necessarily do it. What we're saying is these are not prohibited. So someday in the future, some of these practices may be allowed, depending on what we want to do as a town, as the whoever's really overseeing the site and the management of the property. If we don't put it into the document now in the permitted agricultural, in the permitted activities, it can never be done. It is a in perpetuity document. To change it is a very, very difficult thing. It's not impossible, but it's pretty close to impossible. So what we want to put in here, we want to be really careful and make sure this is what we want in there. And if we want to change something, we should be having those discussions now. Next page, please. So one of the areas that was I'll say a little bit controversial in our discussion was that we had originally allowed for what's called the mosquito aerial larvicide staging process, which is the Central Mass Mosquito Control Project, which the town of Chelmsford is part of this, and they have been staging the disbursement, I guess you call it disbursement, of the larvicide at the Warrenpole site with the family's permission for many years. And so we had put into the document that would be allowed. Originally, that was in the original document. This past April, when it became clear to us this was the first year that we've had the site open to the public, it was open last September, we realized, hey, we're going to have a helicopter landing in the field with people walking their dogs right there, right, very adjacent. We said, we don't think this is a good idea going forward. So the Conservation Commission voted to not allow this going forward. We did allow it this past year in April because it was very last minute when we kind of realized this. But we said, we don't think this is a good idea. We've asked Paul to look with the CMMCP for another site to provide that activity at another site here in town. It could also be Billerica, because as I understand it, it's both Chelmsford and Billerica that this staging is done from that site. In the meantime, we went to the CR and we said we just changed to say not permitted. The land trust didn't agree with us, saying that it was not permitted going forward. And so what we agreed to do was take it out of the document altogether. So we're not addressing it in the document. So what we're saying here is that because it's not being addressed, it's not specifically called out, it's neither prohibited nor permitted. And so it could be changed down the road, in theory. But it's just the way we're taking the action to go forward. So in the latest version, it's been removed as a reference. I say that because right now the property is still under the control officially of the Board of Selectmen, of the Select Board. It's not under the Conservation Commission. So in theory, we made a vote here as the Conservation Commission, and I think you've kind of in spirit given it to us, but not necessarily legally given us control. So that's why I think we want to leave that aside, and you can give it some thought. We have some time to think this through. It's not something that has to be decided right away. I think there's probably other sites in town that can manage this and handle this helicopter staging. It is a one-day event in the third week of April, almost always the same week, almost always a one-day activity. So I'm leaving that for you to just give it some thought and think about it. Next page, please. These are our next steps. So we're working these with the Land Trust and with Chris Alphin in Attorney Haverty's office. So we're doing this review right now. I wanted to give you this overview so that when the document does show up in your lap, and it shows up and we're going to ask you for a signature, you have an idea what you're looking at, you understand what the context is, what some of the issues are. We'll have another discussion about it, but at least you know that this is coming, because it has been a while that we've been working on this. We do have some survey plan discrepancies that we're going to work through with a surveyor. There's some details that need to be done and have a finalized site plan. We have to get the 2 easements. There are 2 easements on this property. We have to get those resolved finally and completed. There is an as-built plan for the driveway and parking lot that DPW is going to work on and get to us. We have some documentation modifications, as I said, about some of the values. I don't anticipate those being controversial. Dale and I have talked, and in principle, I think we're in agreement, but the wording has to be finalized. There's a lot of formatting issues when you have many, many people touching a document like this. The formatting just goes all to hell. So that's got to be cleaned up. We need to define the expectations for the grantee. So the grantee is the Land Trust. We have to define the expectations for them in terms of regularly monitoring. The part of the process for this going forward is that generally on an annual basis, the grantee, in this case the Chelmsford Land Trust, would monitor the site, and there's somewhat of a template for how to do this, where they would go out to the site, they would visit the site, they would look at areas along the boundaries, making sure that neighbors aren't encroaching on our property, that we have used the property per our original agreement. There's a number of things that they would check to make sure that that things are staying on track with what the original purpose of the property was and what's called the baseline document report says. So we have to get an agreement on how that is done and make sure that they provide a report on an annual basis. And then we would keep that report. So as an example, you can imagine that they could say, like, oh, well, that one neighbor they dumped their leaves on your property. We told you 3 years ago, and it's documented right here, and you still haven't done anything about it. You need to do that. They shouldn't be throwing the leaves over onto your property. Something like that. That's a simple thing. It can be a lot more challenging. Then finally, we would get a finalization of what's called the baseline documentation report. This is what that review would be done against. So that's basically the survey report and all of the snapshot of what the property is like at the start of this going forward process. We would then get the approval of the CR with the Conservation Commission. The Land Trust would approve it. All these deliverables would be complete, and then we would come to you and say, okay, now we're ready to have this final review with you. So then we would, once we get your approval, then we would submit it to the state, to the DCS, the Department of Conservation Services. It's possible there'll be some cycle with the state. They may have some questions about it. They may have some changes they want to make. I think they don't actually approve it. They just say, these are the changes you have to make, and then send it back to us, and we make those changes because we don't negotiate with them, I guess. And I'm not sure that they actually approve it. They just say, make those changes and you're all set. And then the board would sign, the land trust would sign, and I presume there's some kind of attachment to the record at the Registry of Deeds. And then we'd be done, and then going forward, we'd have these annual reviews. So that's the process, that's where we're at. The long pole in the tent right now would be that survey plan, getting that cleaned up. The conservation agent, David Kuntz, is working with a surveyor. There is a plan, this is more of a cleanup. We've identified some discrepancies. We want that survey plan to be 100% accurate before we submit it to the state. We don't want to have them finding something not right. Any questions?
When you talk about a permitted use, doesn't mean it's going to be there, but the option is there. So suppose somebody comes forward and wants to implement a permitted use that's not currently there. Is there a gate they go through with you or the land trust, or is it just automatically approved?
No, the wording, well, some things require approval of the grantee, which is the land trust. We are the grantor. So if, I'm going to make it up because I don't remember exactly the wording, but if we had like a Boy Scout Jamboree wanted to happen on the site and they wanted to use the site, they would make a request to the conservation agent, talk to the Conservation Commission. We would then ask if the CR is written such that that kind of event needs the approval of the grantee, then we would then go to the grantee and say, we're looking for this approval. Our wording says, that they should do this within a very timely manner, so, it might be a week or two to get the approval, and then once they get the approval, then it would be, you're all set, you can go ahead.
But what about something that's like more permanent, like a new agricultural use or something like that?
It would be similar. You'd go through that process.
So there's a way to manage it.
Yep. Yeah, so for example, trails, we are looking at having new trails put in at some point. That is definitely, we would have to get their approval. We'd say, here's the plan, we're going to go from point A to point B. And they'd say, yeah, that makes sense. We think that's a good value of using the property. And we get their approval, and then we could execute.
Thank you.
Okay. So you will see a copy of the document at some point this year. I know Paul's looking at me like, why is it taking so long? But it's just, it's taking a lot longer than I would have guessed. But we're actually I think we're actually in pretty good shape. And the Land Trust has been great to work with. We've had our differences, but it's it's the way it is, and we've had a good. We've been making good progress. So I thank you for your time. If there's no more questions, okay, thanks.
Thank you. Okay, next up, Department of Public Works Director Christine Clancy on the monthly ARPA.
Good evening. I'm here with the monthly ARPA update. It's not too, well, I guess there is quite a difference from the last month's update in that we did award one of the larger projects, the Senior HVAC Improvements Project. So with that, awarding of that, in terms of our metrics that we've been tracking, we had $7.9 million of ARPA funds that were allocated to projects. Of that $7.4 million, or 94% of the total, has been allocated, has been procured to date. Of that, we also have been tracking the invoice spent, so 63% has been spent. That number seems to go down from last month, but it's not, the dollar value went up, it's just the percentage, because the percentage went up to the 94%, and it is largely because of the procurement of that Senior Center HVAC Improvements Project. That we've also been tracking project overruns. I think last month we've been tracking about $750,000, between $750,000 and $850,000 in overruns. We were tracking, along with all HVAC projects, a significant overrun. The scope of the Senior Center HVAC project was actually less than we originally had thought. So we were carrying 30% over what we had budgeted, but it actually came in 15% under what we had budgeted, which is great news. And so that brings the amount that we're tracking down from 750,000 to 290,000. So that does free up some potential opportunity for some other projects. Just to go over some of the, this is the spreadsheet we've been updating monthly. So projects in blue are complete, projects in green are procured but still in process. Projects in yellow are partially procured, still more minor completion. The projects in red remain to be, so it's really all that's left is the testing and balancing projects. We're kind of lumping those as one. And I know we've, been trying to make a movement on it this summer. We've just been really bogged down with some of the other projects on here. And then also just as a department, just with some of the other, non-facility projects. But we are, this really is the last projects. And in terms of the grand scheme of things, it's really low dollar value compared to some of the other projects that have been procured. Construction, the project shown in green, the construction will continue. A lot of the HVAC projects, we're now in submittal phase. We're looking at longer lead times. And also, if they're in the schools, we can only get into the schools at certain times because school's in session. So we're tracking winter or spring timeframes, potentially next summer, but we're hopeful for winter or spring break installations, depending on when we receive those materials. But just some of the items to highlight what was remaining. Number 10, the HVAC park upgrades. So there's a small amount of remaining budget there we want to scope out. Number 11, the ductwork diffusers at the CHS. We're just waiting for one final quote to come in. And then I had talked about the testing and balancing projects. That's really the last of the projects to procure entirely. And then number 32, the Kensington Pump Station. That project, we do need to procure some components with the money that we have. We are already projecting an overrun, but that overrun is going to be paid separately. We know that's a $900,000 project, and we're not planning on procuring the remainder of that through ARPA. So with that, there's still about $2.3 million left in ARPA funds. And I know we had initially started to prepare a list of projects. So we have a list that I think we'll be presenting at September 11th of the next meeting, or I can present at the next meeting. I would say this is largely focused on buildings and HVAC. It's great to see how much of the ARPA money went to improve our building HVAC, especially in the schools. And then in terms of DPW projects, as you see when we show you the list, I think a lot of them are tracking around drainage, because with the summer that we've had, we are having a lot of drainage requests coming up and potentially some solutions we could propose through ARPA. I don't know we have a timeline of until next December to allocate the money, and then in terms of spending the money, we have until 2026, so we still have time. I don't know if there's any questions.
Paul, I just had a question about we had allocated money for the police cardio screening and for the firefighter cancer blood screening. And I don't want to know personal details, but did we receive meaningful information out of that?
Yes, it was very well received and very valuable project. Very well, very good done. Thank you. In fact, sometime when we have the chiefs come in, we can have them speak to that. It was very well.
I was just curious.
Any other questions for Christine? Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next up is Town Council Paul Haverty, proposed public comment policy and revisions to the Select Board public input segment. Grab the mic.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman.
Do you want to go through this, Paul? Or
I
highlight?
I went back through I re-reviewed the meeting from back in July when we went over this. I made all of the changes that were discussed. The only question that I really had was on the public policy draft. with regard to the language referring to the Barron v. Kalinda case, and I didn't get a sense as to whether you actually came to a meeting of the minds if you wanted that reference left in or removed. I know we talked about removing it from the section 1.28 policy, but I don't know about the draft public policy. So that was really the question that I had.
I thought what we had said was, so the public policy is kind of the bigger, more overarching one, and so we wanted the language in that because we wanted to provide the reference for context for the future. And then I thought that it was removed from the public input one because that was more like a subset. And so there was a question of, did we need to say it twice?
Right. So for now, I've left it in, and I wanted to bring that to your attention so that you can actually have a conversation.
I'm still in favor of leaving it in.
There were the other minor changes, removing address when you're talking about the chair recognizing someone and saying that they should state their name. Town manager had mentioned last time that there could be circumstances where that could create problems. And I don't believe it's something that a chair can require anyways. So as long as we're getting the person's name, that's sufficient. So I removed that. And I think that, is everything that was discussed, and unless you have other suggestions, I think this is ready to go.
Well, on the first one there, the one for all the boards and committees,
Yep.
on the second paragraph, it says, public comment is a time when town residents can bring matters. I would think there might be opportunities where somebody not from the town wants to make a comment.
So you want to replace that with interested persons?
Or just the public. I think that's how we refer to it
Okay.
in our policy, is just the public.
Yeah, members of the public. Yeah.
And on the policy one, just a couple of suggestions, I guess. The second paragraph says agendas for upcoming board meetings are generally posted prior to the meeting. They are posted, they're not generally.
Yeah, that's it.
And the last sentence on that paragraph seems to be almost repeated in the last paragraph. All speakers will be asked to provide name and address. And in the first sentence of the last paragraph says all comments from the public must be directed, and once recognized, they should state their name prior to speaking. So it seems like that's repetitive to me.
At the bottom of that second paragraph, should we be deleting "and address"?
Yeah, that's what I was
There
wondering.
as well.
I would delete that whole sentence, since, like I said, it seems to be repeated in the last paragraph. Once recognized by the chair, all persons addressing the
It's already
select
pulled
board
out of
Fine
there.
with that.
shall, and the other thing, I mean, I would move that paragraph up above the, where you send the request to the board. I think that makes sense to, where to
Put that
send
at
it.
the end, yeah.
Yeah,
More of a procedural
I
order.
agree.
Yeah.
Move it before while there is no requirement to
Right.
submit.
either one, yeah,
Yeah.
that's fine, yeah.
Yep, so put it right up there.
Okay.
Any other comments?
So just to be clear, 1-28 is already in the select board policy document, so we're going to be updating that, but we're also going to, my understanding was we were going to insert the general policy in the policy document when we adopt it as well, because they go together.
I mean, if we're gonna have that be in our policy document, I think it should refer to our board.
Well, yeah, so this is the general guidance that goes out to the boards and committees, but then we're a board like everybody else, so we
Right.
would be asked to adopt it And I just think that since people reference the select board policies, they're online, it would be good to have this in our policy document once we adopt it. You could even call the front page 1-2.8 and then the public input 1-2.8.1. Because it is kind of a subset.
Yep. That would work.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of having that information about the court case. I think that if we're going to, have other boards and committees implement this policy, I think it's, fine to, it would be okay to preface that with why they're being asked to do it, but
Right.
I don't know, to me, it doesn't really seem necessary, and I don't know. I mean,
Respectfully, I think that's why we started this in the whole first place, and
right, I understand.
I feel that if we're going to adapt it as a board, we should be adopting what we've provided to the other boards and committees. I don't see a downside to providing the context.
Any other comments on that?
I don't know. I think it's a little, I don't know. I'm not completely opposed to putting it in there. I agree, it's nice to have the context, but I don't know. It worries me that there would be other related case law that would then come up potentially that maybe conflicts with that or something. I don't know. I'm not a lawyer,
When this
right?
was
It's a good
when this
question
was
for
when
Paul.
this was first drafted, it did not have that reference.
Yeah.
And we asked town council to please put it in because
Yeah.
of the.
I
I mean,
didn't.
do you think it's a risk?
I know
that
you didn't,
Something
Pat,
else
but
could come up from a legal perspective that
I
don't
didn't
know. I
either.
just
But
I feel like stating one case and not kind of listing all of the applicable case law for this gets us in a legal. I don't know. It just seems.
I don't see there being a strong likelihood
Yeah.
of additional case law superseding this decision. I mean, this decision goes, back to essentially the founding of the country
Yeah.
in terms of its analysis. So I think, it's on a very strong basis. I don't think that we're in risk of it getting changed or significantly added to moving forward.
Yeah.
That being said, I can't give you a guarantee. You
Yeah.
never know.
Yeah, I'm okay with it. Particularly if you don't find anything concerning about leaving it in there.
I'm in the same boat. I guess I can go along with it, but I'm not a big fan of it being in there. I wouldn't mind it being a footnote. It's just like it's right in the middle of the policy, so to speak, and it's almost disruptive when I read it, but.
But I do like I do think the reference is valid. I get it.
Yeah, the reference is, I'm used to seeing when a new document is originated, that the reference goes into the file, so that later on, if somebody wants to come back and wonder what the genesis of this was, they could see it. But, I think Virginia's right. I think it was actually brought up the last time that it would be here. It's just a question of if that's how we want it now or not. If we want it moved, or I don't know what everybody's appetite is.
I still think it should be there. I don't care
Right.
whether it's in the body of the text or a footnote, but I think it should be part of the document.
Okay.
That's my thought.
George, any thoughts on it?
Yeah, I agree. It should be there
Aaron?
somewhere.
Do we have preference as to whether it's in the body or in a footnote?
Um,
It sounds like we all kind of like it there as a reference, and that much at least we're in agreement with, but as a footnote versus having the entire text in there?
Pat, you
Just a
don't like it at
reference
all,
to-
so
I
would
think
you?
we're
Just a reference to the
overthinking this,
case
and
number,
it's
you
time
know?
to wrap it up and move on.
There you
I mean,
go.
can we just
Yeah.
reference the
really
case
do.
number and leave it
No.
at that, or is that not enough? I don't know.
We already reviewed that language. I just don't think we should be reviewing it again. We're
No, the
dragging this
language is
out
the language.
far
This question
longer
is-
than it needs
Yeah.
to be drawn out.
You're right.
My recommendation is that if we're going to look at this one more time, we just have the cleaned up document for the boards and committees. We have the blanks filled in for the select board as section 1-2.8, and we have the updated 1-2.8-1 or .1. And then we vote on that next time. And be done with it.
So do we want to keep this in the body or drop it into a footnote?
I don't think it makes a bit of difference, but if you
Does
really
anybody
feel
care?
strongly about a footnote, I'm okay
Nope.
with it.
I
Not
just-
really.
Okay, we'll just leave it as it is then.
Yeah,
Let's
I
keep
think
the
it's
changes
okay.
to the minimum that we discussed.
Yeah.
Do you have those, Paul, pretty much?
Yes.
Okay,
Thank you.
great. So we'll continue this to the next
So
meeting.
in terms of the public comment policy, we're going to now label that Select Board Policy 1.1-2.
I think it's still with the blanks to be sent out to the
Correct,
boards and
right.
committees
But
as an
so
update.
a third
from Paul.
document, essentially,
Right.
1.2.
But then for this, for the select
Section
board
1.
policy document, that would be 1-2.8. And then the public input segment would be 1-2.8.1.
Right.
And that way they tie together and we don't have to put redundant.
All right, so the public comment policy is going to become 1.28, and then the public input is going to be 1.28 subsection 1,
Except it's 1-28.
1-28.
Yeah. Okay. All set, Paul?
Yes.
Okay. Let's move to number 10, approval of collective bargaining agreement with the firefighters union.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm pleased to bring to you this evening a memorandum of agreement that was reached with the assistance of mediation from the Massachusetts Joint Labor Relations Committee between the town and the Chelmsford Firefighters Union for a successor collective bargaining agreement that covers a period from July 1st, 2022 through June 30th, 2025. This would be the last and final of the town's unresolved collective bargaining agreements. And at this point, it's been adopted by the union. The union had a ratification vote. We were notified of the success of that vote. The agreement is, as you can see, it's a one-page. It's real brief, and it mirrors very similar to what we did with the police superior officers union. And basically, it's a agreement, as I noted, goes back to July 1 of 2022. There's a $1.75 per hour increment to the pay grade, and then a 2.5% increase to the schedule for each of the fiscal years. We add Juneteenth to the holidays. We've done with other agreements. And then there are just two matters at the end of the agreement, 4 and 5, that pertain specifically to the fire department regarding station bidding, that if an officer's position becomes available due to retirement, demotion, or other causes, the chief may allow for the bidding of such positions based on seniority. So again, that was agreed to obviously by the chief and the union. And then the final one deals with residency. The town and the union agree that members of the union can establish their residence within the town or at any place within or outside of the Commonwealth that is within 25 miles of the perimeter of the town. And that's similar to what we saw exist in some of our neighboring comparable communities. And I think it just sort of goes to the fact of cost of living in terms of, so that's the agreement. As you can see, it's been signed by myself on behalf of the town. It's been signed by the union and ratified by the union. So upon your ratification vote, it will then proceed to town meeting this fall, October 16th.
Any comments, discussion? Take a motion.
I'll make a motion that we approve the memorandum of agreement by and between the Town of Chelmsford and Chelmsford Firefighters Union Local 7839 for a successor collective bargaining agreement for the period July 1, 2022 to June 30, 2025, as presented.
I'll second.
All those in favor? Aye, 5-0. Okay, next up, 11, strategic plan request for proposals.
Do you want to start on that, Virginia?
Sure.
Yeah.
So what Paul put in the packet were different rough orders of magnitude that we received during the basis of, or the expression of interest process. And he added a couple down at the bottom. The town of Westford has allocated $95,000 out of ARPA funds to do a strategic plan. And then in your packet, Paul found a very extensive plan for the town of Wellesley, and there's just one excerpt in the packet, which is around their action plan and implementation plan. It's like it's over a 300-page document, what they came out with from that process. And Paul was told they spent about $150,000 for that over the course of 2 years, and they're budgeting another $200,000 to update it in 2026. So Paul and I went through and we looked at the responses to the basis of estimate and looked at kind of the range at what people were estimating without doing a full-up proposal, and felt that some of them may or may not be a good fit. Some of them it was questionable, like we just would need more information. But our gut was that in terms of budgeting for the town of Chelmsford, if you look at what we want as an output, and like the comparable plans from Shrewsbury and other communities, that we're probably looking at $125,000 to be comfortable in terms of budgeting, and then we could shoot maybe for something under that. We weren't sure that something in the range of 50 or those lower ends. We just need more information to know if it's going to give us what we want, and we would do that through the proposal process. I know that I was, and I'll let Paul speak, but I personally was a little reluctant to budget totally on the low end because we might find ourselves short in terms of what we really need. You want to add anything, Paul?
Yeah, I mean, I think as Virginia noted, if looking at the expression of interest, if you were to bring one of these parties on board and outline the process that they would utilize, because we sort of, again, it wasn't an RFP. We asked them to say, how would you attack this project? It was very clear that the more expensive listings were the more detailed and more professional. And I think what you saw, you saw one of the proposals gave us an email, and they're not even on the list. And then there were others that were at the low end, where if you brought them on and did the process, you wouldn't arrive at the outcomes that I think we keep talking about. Are there specific, measurable action items that have to be taken and then can be measured and completed and so forth, so that you actually, similar to what we're doing right now with the master plan update, that you then have something.
That's exactly what this looks like.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. Then that's what you're going to get. You're going to have to have the company come in and do what is sort of their extensive version of how they do that project, and that's what you need. And so again, by looking at over the 8 proposals that we received, that was clear that you're only going to get that full range, if that's what you're seeking, by that $100,000 or $125,000 range of services. Because I don't think there's any doubt that amongst this board in our discussions that we want a strategic plan. The thing is you just don't want a plan that, that's great, it's a bunch of platitudes, and then it gets thrown on the shelf and never utilized. And I think that's the difference in terms of the level of work that's done by the firms. If you go in the full process of having them fully, bring you from step A to step Z, if that's the way the town goes.
And there's a couple numbers that aren't on this page. I just realized too, if you recall, we looked at Shrewsbury as a model, and I think, Paul, you said they spent $85,000 a couple years ago. And then the Chelmsford school system did their strategic plan recently, and that was over 150, but that also included a comprehensive look at the facilities and the capital investments. So that to me just said that 125, we could do something reasonable for that. Maybe we can do better than that, but you're getting an approval from town meeting for a number, so we wanted to leave a little cushion.
Yeah, and sort of where this goes from this is, this would obviously be on the warrant for fall town meeting, as you discussed, and we'll see later. You'll sign that warrant 3 weeks from tonight on September 11th, and then 3 days later we'll be in this room with the finance committee presenting, well, what's our scope of work, what's it going to cost, what's the output, and then obviously a month later from that would be town meeting. And so again, if we don't need to fully come to grips with everything this evening, but we really need to by our next meeting in terms of how much do we want to spend and what are we looking for, to be provided by an outside facilitator to, for that funding.
If we were to just say we ask for 125, does anybody have an issue with that? And we shoot for lower than that, but at least we have a buffer.
With this kind of an outline, I definitely think this would be the number.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah.
Do we need to shoot for higher than that? With the explanation that we're going to try to spend less, but we need to, I mean, so to be completely, the Shrewsbury plan compared to this that I'm looking at for Wellesley are vastly different. The Wellesley one is what I would be looking to see, all the action items and all of the, but that's obviously, yeah.
Well, then you're
I think-
talking 200,000.
But that's, yeah, I mean, that's not.
I think the drawback to asking for more is then these provide,
Start
these.
to scope it to
Yeah,
fill the budget.
Exactly.
Yeah, well, then you have the budget, right, so you'll spend
Yeah.
it, yeah. Yeah, I don't know.
The Shrewsbury plan did have specific goals and actions. It just doesn't have the depth of detail.
Yeah.
In all the different, Wellesley looked at a lot of things across the town in depth. So we can say 125 and validate it on the 11th when we get
Mhm.
together, if
Right.
that's where people's heads are at.
That's what I think.
All right.
Okay, so I would recommend looking through this a little bit closer and so forth before the 11th. All right, next up, town manager reports.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a few items this evening. I'm pleased to inform the board, and at 5:10 this evening, I received the signed purchase and sale agreement for the Coolest Farm property acquisition. It's not, we didn't update the agenda and everything, but the reason I put it on here is, even if I didn't have it, I wanted to inform the board that I had signed it on behalf of the town and that we were moving with the court, towards the town's acquisition of it. And again, there's really nothing in the document this evening that I need to discuss or review with you. Council reviewed the document and the drafts and so forth. What I really wanted to do, and why I put this on the agenda this evening, is, one, to give you a formal status update, but two, let the community be aware that this is coming to Fall Town Meeting in 2 months, that, a major land acquisition of over 41 acres, from the Community Preservation Fund at a significant cost. And so I just want to let the board know that, the months of effort that have gone into this have resulted in a signed purchase and sale agreement. And then the final step would be town meeting approval. We have Community Preservation Committee approval, obviously it wouldn't be here. And same thing, it'll be on the warrant when you sign it in 3 weeks. It'll go to the Finance Committee for presentation in September, and then town meeting in October. So I think it's great news. I think it's sort of, kind of perhaps very fitting that it followed what Carl Bischoff presented to the board and the community earlier this evening, because you're talking a project of a similar magnitude in terms of preservation of open space, and similar to what Carl described. The vision is, and we discussed this at the Community Preservation Committee meeting last Wednesday, we anticipate, similar to what happened with Warren Poll, there'll be a committee formed to explore how the town would use this, and then there will be a conservation restriction or an open space or preservation, a deeded restriction that would talk about the allowed and permitted uses for the property with a third-party holder, very similar here. The difference here is that this is of 4 different parcels. And so there's the main parcel, where the dwelling is located on one side of Pine Hill Road, and then there's the other parcel on the other side of the street, and then there's the 2 wet parcels. I think the 2 wetter parcels aren't going to be very material for discussion, but I think there will be discussion and obviously some different considerations for the 2 parcels on either side of Pine Hill Road. And just for people who are watching this is the property that you see when you go past Weston Nurseries towards Westford, and you see the sign that says for sale, on either side of the roadway. So right past Weston Nurseries, I said. So again, I'm pleased to at least provide the community the opportunity to preserve this open space. And I want to thank everybody from council to Evan Belansky, the Community Preservation Committee, who've been working to bring this opportunity to the town. So it's good news this evening.
So, community preservation, was the vote unanimous?
It was unanimous,
Okay, good.
yeah. And then part of that will be, there'll be 2 articles. One, and you'll see it, you won't see it on this warrant because it just the meeting was last Wednesday. But there'll be an article to acquire the property, and then there'll be another article for the planning and preparation of the property for public use. Because they're like we saw with Warren Poll, but even more so here, there's some work that has to be done on the site to allow for public use, because it's been fallow for a while, and there's some farm equipment and other stuff that has to be cleared up. So anyway, that's great news. Speaking of that, as I just indicated, I do have the in your packet the second draft for the fall annual town meeting, which I keep repeatedly say you'll sign 3 weeks from tonight at your next scheduled meeting. The only change on this document is actually in the accompanying warrant is I did get the language from Evan Belansky for the specific zoning bylaw change for the adult social daycare. It's that chart that you see for the allowed uses. And then as I mentioned, there'll be two actions that you don't see listed on here. One would be what you see there is Article 7. There'll be an article placed in between that one. I'm sorry, which would be for the preparation and planning for the Coolest Farm property if the town purchases it. So obviously, the town successfully votes to approve it, by a 2/3 vote because it's a land acquisition. There'll then be another article by majority vote to appropriate $50,000 for the planning and permitting and preparation for it. And then the only other change that's not on here that you will see, and it's something that I copied you on, is it would be to address the fact that if the town's double pole bylaw is unenforceable, then we should rescind that bylaw, because what we don't have a situation where it causes confusion for future boards and the public of, well, why aren't we, enforcing a bylaw that we've been advised is not enforceable. So that will go later in the warrant, probably after what you now see as 22, as a general bylaw amendment. So with that, what you'll see between this draft and the final draft is me obtaining final language on a number of things from some of the placeholders that have been put in there. One from the regarding the Clean Energy and Sustainability Committee. They're having a meeting this Wednesday night about their article regarding specialized energy code. So that going forward, and then I've got some easement language, so forth, coming from DPW and such. So again, I don't think it will materially change between now and when you sign the warrant 3 weeks from tonight.
What do you anticipate under Article 1?
Article 1, we're required under Article 1 to provide the 5-year financial forecast by the town manager, which I utilized John Souza, our finance director. The other thing I thought of, and I hate to put Christine on the spot, but I would think, given that it's town meeting, it might be appropriate to ask her to give a brief overview of how we've expended the ARPA funds and what we've used it for. 'Cause I think that's a good setting and focus, and it sort of also falls into some of the things we'll be asking for at that town meeting in terms of, in terms of the big picture, in terms of how we'll be using the free cash, which I hope will be certified by that meeting. So again, we're not talking, a long presentation, but just a high-level overview saying, the town has, has received this much in ARPA funds. This is what we've completed. By then, we will have had the discussion at this table about how we propose to use the balance of funds, and just say, folks, many of you should be aware that this is what's going on with the ARPA, projects and so forth, and then how it fits into our capital plan and our financial plan going forward. I just thought that would be an appropriate thing to do, and I apologize, Christine, not putting it, because I thought of this over the weekend as I was, it's like, well, what could we be reporting? And I guess my last question and comment would be, if you have any other reports and committees that you think are timely for fall town meeting, please let me know, because I envision it's probably going to be a 2-night town meeting. 2-session town meeting, I should say.
So I have a couple of things on Article 17.
Yep.
It references at the end, authorize the total amount of expenditures for fiscal year 2022. Is that?
Oh, I'm sorry, that should be FY24. I'm sorry, thank you.
Okay. And how will this be initially funded?
There'll be no funding. Remember, it's a revolving fund.
Okay, well, it says we're going to authorize.
Well, you have to authorize, by virtue of the statute in the state, you have to authorize how much money can be held in the fund, but you don't actually appropriate money into the fund.
Oh, okay.
So that's whether it's the senior trip fund or all the other ones that we do. We don't appropriate money in, but we have to specify the financial scope of the fund annual, and you have to vote it every year along with that other list that we see every spring town meeting of those now 8 or 9 different revolving funds.
Okay, right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
And then 2 quick things, and these are just to formally notify you in the community of grant awards. Since our last meeting, we were able to announce the Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness 2.0 grant award. That grant award was $95,000, and that will allow the town to update its Municipal Vulnerability grant, which was 1.0, by incorporating the state's request to incorporate flooding and climate change and water quality improvement and urban heat island. Basically, it's a lot of the climate change issues that they've asked us to put into the process. So that's what we've been approved for. And so I gave you all kinds of detail, just because I know people say, well, what's the $95,000 for? And therefore, if people want to look at it. But in essence, we're pleased to be part of that program because it will be a source of funding in the future to address climate change and other related issues for the community. And then lastly, we received the Complete Streets Funding Program Grant Award in the amount of $500,000. Tony Rapucci, our town engineer, was the lead on this one, much like Evan Belansky was one on the previous one. And that's going to be utilized for the sidewalks along Turnpike Road, that gap in the sidewalks between Warren Avenue to where the credit union is at Billerica Road. That's a particularly challenging site because of the wetlands there. And, there's also a culvert crossing. So that's great news as well. So that concludes my report for this evening.
Okay, any other comments on that? Okay, great. So next up is the annual performance appraisal of the town accountant, Darlene Lucio.
Evening.
Hi, Darlene, how are you?
Good.
Glad to be back from vacation?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so my plan was to go through each one of the goals and just highlight a few things that stuck out to me, and also invite the board, if, as we go through them, if you wanted to jump in to make additional comments yourselves. The first goal being financial controls and reporting of all ARPA funding. Darlene's worked very closely with Christine, town manager, with John Souza, to keep us up to date on these ARPA funds, keeping that spreadsheet up to speed, questioning even some of the expenditures and so forth and so on. So I think that's been a really valuable tool for this board, as was now getting closer to the point where we can start to address some of the reserve that we still have left.
Yeah, I also, with these funds, also that people don't see that I have to report to the federal government on a quarterly basis, all expenditures, all the projects. So they require, because at some point there's probably going to be an audit, the towns are going to be audited. So on a quarterly basis, I'm also submitting to the federal government all of the invoices and all the backup that they need for each. And it has to be, we have to put in each project. And we also have to have W-9 forms for all the vendors that we're using. They want to make sure that we're procuring properly. There's also a procurement part of that whole reporting to them, because they want to make sure that we're also procuring.
Right.
Because I think they're looking, I mean, there could be fraudulent, with all this money that's being put through these towns.
Right. Okay, goal number 2 was working with the new audit firm and addressing items that may be contained in the FT22 financial management audit and the general government side, on the general government side, excuse me. Clearly, the audit results that have come in from the new audit firm have been more than satisfactory. I think they've been very good. The whole process, I mean, from our perspective, has been seamless. Maybe from yours, it was a little bit more difficult. And I know from personal experience how hard it is sometimes to change your auditing partner or your firm. And it's a lot of additional work for the folks, for the point people, and especially, you being the point person, in order to walk them through what we do here. On top of that, you had the new Munis system and everything else that was going on. And again, it appeared to be seamless. Their comments were excellent. Everything overall went well. Any other comments on any of that? Okay. Goal number 3, as part of the town's financial team, continue to provide guidance with respect to financial matters of the town and report quarterly to the select board. The reporting that we get continues to be complete. It's accurate. You have a good breadth and depth of knowledge of everything that goes on in town, sometimes so deep I get a little lost sometimes, but I know it's because you know the details, and as you dig down and drill down through some of these charges and so forth, the genesis of those. And again, that relationship between yourself, the town manager, and the finance director is invaluable. And when you guys talk the way you talk and coordinate, I think that just shows in our audit reports, and it certainly showed up in our bond ratings and so forth that we also achieved during this year. Any other comments and so forth? Okay. So next one is other key performance factors. So this is kind of a general strengths, weaknesses, and so forth. Again, some of this will be redundant, but great relationship, with your peers, but also with your subordinates. From what I have, I know from what I have witnessed, and as well as some of the others' comments that were here, continues to be just a strong leader. I know you're working closely to cross-train, but also working closely to develop your number 2 and to bring them up to speed and bring them in, get more and more involved in the municipal side, considering their background was outside of municipal accounting. Focus areas for the coming year will include continued leadership and support in the ARPA funds management, new allocations, increasing bench strength, and transition for that upgrade, final changes to Munis and so forth. So, yeah, and that was done extremely well from what I've seen. Any other questions on our comments that I may have overlooked or missed? No?
I think you covered it well, Mike.
Okay, great. So overall performance evaluation. So now we get an opportunity to decide what Darlene's overall performance rating is. And individually, we had 1 exceptional, and we essentially had 4 that were consistently exceed the expected level of performance. So I'll open this up to everybody for comment, discussion, and maybe a motion.
Yeah, I just want to, commend Darlene for always being willing to take responsibility for new things that come along, specifically the ARPA is what I'm thinking about. I know so many communities have hired people specifically to handle that, and you seem to be doing it and keeping up with everything, so, it gives you a lot of credit for that. And, other things that have already been mentioned, the AAA bond rating, that, I'm sure that couldn't have happened without your input. And having no deficiencies in our first audit with a new audit firm, I think that's also very commendable, so.
Thank you.
In addition, I would just add to, we had a goal last year with Paul on succession planning, and I think that you've just kind of taken a proactive group within your own group to work on building the strength of your team, and I know you've had some changeover too, so I appreciate the attention you've provided on your team as well.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, if anybody has a motion.
So you're looking for a motion for the overall performance?
Yeah, for the overall rating.
See, that's what I thought that we would do without people doing them individually. That's why I messed up on that. But anyway,
okay.
So I'll make a motion that we rate the town accountant as consistently exceeds expected level of performance.
Second.
And all those in favor? Aye. 5-0. So the final rating is consistently exceeds expected level of performance.
Thank you.
Excellent job.
Thank
Really,
you.
very
And I always
good.
appreciate all your support and everything too. So I really do. I mean, it's nice to have a board that.
Good. Your input and communication's been invaluable for us over this
Thank you.
past
And I
year,
always, and I do
especially.
thank the town manager and the finance director for their support. We have a great team, so I'm proud to be part of that team.
And there are, of course, some goals here that you have
too.
signed up for. And in most parts, I've seen
Yes, we do have
collaboration.
yeah,
Everybody
we do have
is.
and we have a new upgrade coming in with another one. Really has to do with, I don't know if everybody knows, but it has something to do with Microsoft. Microsoft is doing away with, I don't know, some number, 10 point something or something. And it's making everyone do these upgrades with the computers. And so we're doing this, it's going to be really just total web-based. And I just got notified while I was on vacation, they upped our date. So we're scheduled for the end of September now to do the upgrade.
Right.
So that's going to be done. We don't really have a choice. We're just, they're having to do
You
that.
barely through the training on this last
Yeah, I
iteration.
know.
You're already into the
And
next
now
one.
I know. I'm getting nervous already about it because it is much different. They sent me, a test environment. I went in and it's all pretty much the same features. It's just the look and the feel, and some people just aren't good with change. So it's really web-based.
Okay.
But we'll be doing that at the end of September. That's going to be we're going live with that at the end of September. So that's going to be a big thing. with
Okay.
them. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Yep. Alrighty. Thank you so much.
Okay. Next up, annual performance appraisal for the town manager, Paul Cohen. Let me just see if I can find that document. Okay, so as we all know, this performance appraisal format's a lot different. There's a lot of, different categories for competencies, if you will, within that job title. So I'll try to go through each category again, just summarize, and then we'll get into goals. And I'll attempt to summarize again, but at the same time, I do invite anyone that wants to comment as I step through these categories, please do. Category 1 being relations with governing body. There are several subsections here. I'm not going to go through each one, but when you take a look at the ratings across the board on the document, you'll see that the majority are 4s. There's quite a few 5s and a few 3s in there as well. So very strong performance in this area. Some of the comments were, town manager is accessible 24/7, conscientious about prompt responses, strengthens cooperative relationships between the town manager and the board. So that was really noted in a few areas where they feel like there's been a lot of work in that area, conscientious work in that area that's been noted, and it's appreciated. Notable progress in taking definitive actions on major issues. Feel like requests are dealt with equitably and fairly, and relationship with the legislative delegation has definitely improved through the actions of the board, but led by the town manager, so that's been duly noted. Next category, Category 2, organizational relations, fiscal management. Again, lots of 5s, 4s, a few 3s in there as well. Let's see. This kind of got cut off a little bit. Okay. And some of the comments included communications are clear, understandable, and backed by his breadth and depth of experience. Work on sewer inflow reduction, which was a huge part, of course, with the DPW, and the full circle permit database was a really nice improvement, and as well as the trash and recycling mobile app. Some of the innovative ideas that you have come up with, Paul, have been very good and very helpful in moving some of these initiatives forward. Focus on resolving several outstanding collective bargaining. As we saw tonight, we have another union that we have an MOA that's been signed off, so that's good, and we have several union contracts that have now been completely approved. Town manager is very much respected in the region and in the state, and he definitely understands the culture of the town when he's considering the types of things that he's putting forward or the types of things that he is doing.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
You're getting a couple of confused looks because you skipped
Yeah.
A and B under category 2.
I skipped, well, that's probably because this sheet didn't have it on. I know, I looked at, oh, I'm sorry.
No worries.
It got stuck.
You jumped to
So,
C.
so those comments, those are on C. I won't have to say them
That's
again.
not on my
No,
notes.
let me come back, I'm sorry, my pages got stuck together. It's a lengthy document. So fiscal management, let me come back there because that's where we were. Again, lots of 4s and 5s, excellent fiscal management. Obviously, the bond rating was a huge, in my mind, accomplishment, and it wasn't something that was done yesterday. It was something that's been done over the course of many years, and a lot of hard work to develop the team and the focus and everything else. So I think you did a great job there. Responsive to the board's request for early visibility into the budget and into the consideration for some of those budget items. That was really helpful, especially in advance of some of the meetings that we've had. Works extremely well with other members on the finance team. And presentations to the Select Board, Finance Committee, and Town Meeting are comprehensive, concise, and promote the general understanding and acceptance. So I think that's all been, leading to some of the grades that I saw in this particular consolidated report. Next one, personnel management, which is B. I'm still on the right page, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Again, a lot of 5s, 4s, and some 3s. Some of the comments that I noted on here was the board has little visibility into some of the day-to-day. So some of the things that are requested for us to rate on this are kind of difficult for us. But from where we sit, it seems to be sound. Strong leadership, and especially with some of the appointments and hires that you've made during the course of the year. We know you conduct regular meetings with your staff to keep them informed and to also solicit their input and feedback on some of the things that are going on in town. There definitely seems to be a reciprocal sense of loyalty within the town, and that's from you down and from your staff up. And that doesn't, that's just a great example of strong leadership and strong communication and so forth. Everyone is comfortable and is confident that they're in the loop and they know what's going on. You encourage and foster training in order to keep your staff up to date in several areas, and you set an excellent example for work ethic. I mean, there's so many nights that you're here, late into the evening with these meetings, you attend everything. That's tough when you're working for somebody that's doing that all the time, because then you've got to raise your bar and you've got to raise your game, and I think that's well noted. Managing the organization, I just went through that before, but I think that's probably adequate at this point. So I don't have to go through that again. Just, somebody stop me sooner if I skip a page. Category 3, relations with the public. Again, a cross-section of 5s, a few 5s, some 4s, and some 3s. Highly accessible and responsive to complaints and concerns that have been brought to him where residents do not want to come forward in public. So even when, they come back into one of the board members or elsewhere, you're very responsive on those issues as well. So you're just a constant presence in town, whether it's at all the meetings of the boards and so forth, or whether it's attending events outside of this building. You're always there. You're always involved. You're not just a bystander. You're in the middle of it, and that's very much noted. You have a willingness to meet with the residents, and also your monthly newsletter is very comprehensive. It's timely, and it's informative, so I think that's much appreciated as well. Category 4, relations with other government agencies. Lots of 5s and 4s, so more 5s than anything. And Paul's worked effectively with the board in our objective to enhance our relationship with legislators. That's been real important. That was a focus by the board in the past year, and we've had some very productive meetings, I think, so far, and now we have clear action items that we're following up on, and they seem more and more engaged with us and responsive. So that's been a really nice improvement over the course of this past year. You secured over $700K of funding for the Economic Development Bill and for FY24 earmarks. Your leadership in some of the other committees and groups with like Middlesex 3 Coalition have been instrumental in keeping the needs of Chelmsford in the forefront. And you've also worked closely with other municipalities around us in order to stay current with some of the things that they may be doing to keep Chelmsford current with maybe best practices, et cetera. Okay, now we're going into goals. This will be, let me just go sewer infrastructure just as a major goal. Plans for addressing sewer capacity have been developed and initiated. The inflow and infiltration plans are solid and have been a priority as they appear to be effective. So some of these plans for addressing our capacity have been very good. Long-term solutions are limited and need additional attention to broaden the possibilities, if possible, to advance those with merit during '24. So we definitely have to look to the next step on what we have to do, and at least in our draft goals for this coming year, it's in there. So I think that's, along with the sewer bank and so forth, we've done some good work in that area, and you've been a leader in that area, so we appreciate that. Road and sidewalk infrastructure, all resources are being used to the fullest extent to address road and sidewalk issues. Significant road work has been completed, and I think there's also been some innovative road resurfacing and for road treatment during the snow season and ice season. I think that's been important. And I think some of those changes have really yielded some important and interesting improvements. I think the updates to the road plan and having a prioritized sidewalk plan have been big changes, so that now we do have prioritized plans that can consistently be reviewed and updated as far as priority goes, as well as the fact that they've been consolidated. When you look at one, I know our DPW director is looking at sidewalks to go with roads because of the economic and probably a little bit less impact on the community when we're doing it in one shot rather than doing it in two. It's cheaper and it's less of an issue, and also involving the school committee and superintendent in some of those sidewalk discussions as well as important. Truck traffic, speed bumps were put in place up on Ledge, which reportedly have made a nice improvement up there, which is great. We know we have a difficult situation up there, and what we've been able to get accomplished and what you've been able to get in place have been some measures to help in the interim while we're trying to tackle some of the bigger and broader issues. ARPA funding, again, as I mentioned before, the reporting has been comprehensive and complete. We feel as though think from what I can see, the topics that we've chosen and the projects that we've chosen have been effective. They're infrastructure related. They'll help everybody in town, not just a few. There are a few that we did pull out that are a little bit different, like for the CCA and so forth, but in the most part, it's been a good use of these funds. I think the tracking's been great, and we look forward to seeing the next list of priorities that comes to us to deal with the rest. Budgets, operating budget, again, we appreciate the efforts for the earlier visibility for up in advance of the tri-board meeting that we have in December. I think that helped everybody to be a little bit more prepared for that meeting. Tax strategies, modifications to the senior citizen property tax relief. Again, I believe that was your proposal that brought forward. I think that was good. And the implementation of the sewer rate schedules to better accommodate the taxpayers, but also to reduce the bills for some of the lower users in town, which are typically some of those on the senior citizen side and so forth, which is great. And it just kind of brings us more in line with other communities and so forth for best practices. The assessor's office provided the select board with guidance and background information to make tax classifications decisions better in advance, so we got a little bit of education there. And the tax relief proposals were presented and enacted as well that improved ways for those who chose to engage in work-off programs and so forth. Again, your suggestion to expand that further was, I think, was well received by not just this board, but also by the town meeting. Okay, legislative leverage, we've kind of talked about that, but efforts to bring resources to Chelmsford are continuous. Progress has exceeded expectations. We really feel like we've been able to get a lot of monies and a lot of grants and so forth, and a lot of attention, I guess, from our legislative partners in some of these areas. Took the lead in coordinating our board discussions with legislators and in helping plan for them. We feel as though your efforts have been so much more proactive this year than what we actually saw in prior years. Not that they're different, but they're more visible. And I guess it helps for engagement with both of us. Chelmsford Center of the Arts. This is a big year because we've actually had two different directors this year. We had the changing from Lexi Lattimore, who started to expand some of the offerings that were there, really brought a different sense of financial reporting and projections on what she thought she might be able to do. And, you know, the expanded menu was started out. Unfortunately, she's moved on, and we have new leadership now, and it appears that, although that's just been in place for a month or two, it appears that the continued expansion of offerings is ongoing there, and we look forward to meeting with the new director to see how they're doing. With the overall plan is to kind of understand on a 3-year plan is to understand how the CCA will be working, and maybe to get a predictable budget, if you will, or maybe income expectations. Who knows? Civic engagement. Town manager has partnered with the board to improve communications with other boards and committees, and I think part of that was with the questionnaire that went around and some of the engagement that all the board, as well as yourself, had with some of these other groups, and, you know, working together on some of the follow-up actions. And I know you had some outreach with the high school with regard to the students doing a shadowing day in May, in the event that they were interested. Process improvements, there were some significant updates on that. You made some changes from a process standpoint to expand the training and so forth. Procurement process is updated, and the trash recycle app was launched. And that was a big add, I think, especially considering we're in the middle of changing our trash and recycle partner. Procurement training and certifications were implemented, and permitting database, again, implemented, which were nice improvements. Parks and recreations, we didn't complete that goal. However, we do have that carried forward on our FY24 draft right now. I don't anticipate it's going anywhere, other than that we're going to complete it in '24. Strategic planning, you definitely played a major role in this, not only in getting some of the other communities' plans that they have been put in place, but also getting the level of interest document out to some of the communities or some of the partners, potential partners, to determine who that might be. You got the Shrewsbury strategic plan quickly for us to take a look at, to give everybody on the board kind of a sense of what that document might look like. And we're preparing now again for the next steps on those plans. Warren Poll, we had that presentation today, but DPW worked to complete the parking lot area, and the property was open for use in September, which was a nice change. Fire stations, I know you served as a member on the fire stations committee, and with a focus on staffing and you know, the stations, the physical stations themselves. A lot of work was completed. I know that we're going to be looking forward in '24 to try to get some, you know, some output, the final output suggestions from from the committee, as well as what your input is from that. PFAS up on Richardson Road. Early on in the fiscal year, we actually launched that remediation system that's up there. We've gotten great results, as you might expect, early on, and the real question is going to be is to monitor the ongoing, continue to manage Weston and Sampson, make some adjustments as we might need to, and continue to understand kind of the field effect or the field PFAS issue that's out there that goes well above and beyond what's localized at Richardson Road. Town Common and its extension improvements, ongoing project which has seen incremental work. Certainly the tree work that was done downtown at the Common looks excellent. I think everybody's happy about that. I've seen a lot of good comments on that. And that's probably about it. Oh, the new sound system was a big improvement. I could actually hear everybody at the parade. When we had the parade and the announcements and so forth, it was really helpful. So, it was a lot. So at any rate, goals and objectives, so we've completed that. So now we've gotten everybody's individual recommendations. We had some 3 4s, a 3.5, and a 4.5 from all the board members. And at this point, I'd open it up for any additional comments or motions, et cetera, to come up with a final.
Mr. Chair, I think you've covered the comments well. I would just, I had provided an overall summary comment with my ratings, so I would just ask that before you sign the final document that be included. It looks like it got overlooked.
Okay.
Pat usually does that too. I don't know if you had provided one.
I don't remember if I did or not. I'll have to look.
I did too.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
I think it's just an oversight, so I would just
Okay.
ask that those comments be put into the final document.
Okay, I'll
So-
have that checked.
I wonder if we're going to allow the town manager to react to his review.
Okay. Do you want, okay, you're
Certainly
going to vote the
open.
rating first, or you're going
I don't know.
It doesn't matter to
Well,
me.
would you rather react?
No, it doesn't
after the
matter.
rating?
No.
It might affect
I
the
think we can
rating.
see where the rating is. You can do the
Okay,
math.
well, that's up to you.
No, I want to thank the board for your assistance and partnership during the past year. When we were rattling through all the items, it just occurred to me all the different activities I work with many of you on, as well as the other boards and committees, and as well as the department heads. I'm blessed, honestly, and I say this and I mean it. I mean, I look forward to coming to work every day. I'm blessed with the people who work, in the various town buildings, whether it be in my office or in this building, or, again, I don't want to list because but basically across the community where we've got a great team that works to serve this community, and it extends obviously to the town meeting representatives who basically support the initiatives and that we bring before them, as well as the residents of the community. It's a great team, it's a great community, and again, I appreciate the comments that are reflected because I get the performance appraisal, but clearly there's so many who hands in this, and I have the pleasure and the fortunate ability to interact with the whole spectrum, from residents to to the board members, the department employees, and so forth, everyone in between. So I want to thank you for the experience of the last year, and look forward to continuing to serve you and the community in the year ahead.
Okay. So the comments or motions?
I'll make a motion that we provide an overall rating of 4 for the town manager.
I'll second.
All those in favor? Aye, 5-0.
Thank you.
Excellent year.
Thank you.
Mr. Town Manager. Okay. Let's see, appointments.
Yeah, just a few appointments. I'm seeking your confirmation this evening. First one is the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. Christopher Thornton, for an unexpired 3-year term ending June 30th, 2025. And then on the Recycling Committee, there's 2 appointments. Dave Foley is seeking to join the Recycling Committee, and as is Lindsay Sieber, and those terms that expire June 30th, 2024.
Okay, just a note that the DEI committee is our
Oh, I'm
appointment.
sorry, that's
So
right,
it would
that's
be a
right.
different
Okay,
motion.
Right. Sorry, it should be two
Yeah.
separate motions,
Yeah,
but
it is.
I wanted to let you know that we have
Yep.
all those.
That's okay, it was a lot tonight.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll take a motion on the select board appointment.
I'll make a motion to appoint Christopher Thornton to the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee for a term to expire June 30th, 2025.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, 5-0. Okay, now your appointments, I'm looking for a motion to confirm.
I'll make a motion to approve the town manager's appointments of David Foley and Lindsay Sieber to the Recycling Committee for terms to expire on June 30th, 2024.
I'll second.
All those in favor? Aye, 5-0.
Thank you.
Okay, the next is 16, and I actually provided this quicker than what we had talked about. We had talked about this actually coming up on the September 11th, but I just thought, get it out there to get in front of everybody so that they could comment if they wanted to. I'm perfectly happy to skip this until the 11th, but I just thought I'd get it out in front of anybody, if anybody had any kind of more macro comments and not get involved into the nitty-gritty.
I had one macro comment under utilities. The double pull bullet is missing.
Okay.
And under sewer stormwater, I thought we also talked about a bullet on infrastructure maintenance and possibly one on drainage. Wasn't really sure where that went
Okay.
at the end of the meeting.
I'll take another look
I would
at
just
the,
double check that.
Yep, I'll take a look at the flip charts again to see if there's anything I might have missed, and have that ready for the 11th, okay? Okay. Select Board Member Liaison Reports and Referrals. George? Virginia?
Just as Paul's mentioned previously, the Finance Committee will begin reviewing the town meeting warrant articles on Thursdays in September, starting with September 14th.
Okay, Erin? And Pat?
Yeah, I have a couple. We've had 2 ribbon cuttings since our last meeting, our last regular meeting. Behavior Frontiers, who provide autism treatment and support on Mill Road, and also Pro Care Nail and Spa in Central Square. It doesn't look like Bob's Coins anymore in that building, I can guarantee you. So congratulations to both those businesses. Just a note that the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee will be doing their annual usage count on the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail on Saturday, September 9th. They have plenty of people to do the counting, but everybody should get out there and walk or bike or whatever that day to make sure we can boost up those numbers. It makes it look good for the rail trail itself. And lastly, condolences to the family of Doris Wheeler. I don't know how many people on the board knew Doris. She was a good friend to the police and fire departments. In fact, several years ago, she received a special award from the Chelmsford Police Foundation. She was always bringing them things and always had good things to say about the police and fire departments in town. So Doris is definitely going to be missed.
Thank you, Pat. And I'm all set. So I will take a motion to adjourn to executive session, not to return.
Okay, I'll make a motion that we adjourn to executive session, not to return to open session for the purpose of strategy with respect to litigation regarding the North Chelmsford Water District PFAS claim, strategy with respect to litigation regarding Ledge Road commercial truck traffic, and strategy with respect to contract negotiations with non-union personnel, namely the town accountant and town manager, and to conduct contract negotiations with non-union personnel. Doesn't that say the same thing again? The town accountant and the town manager pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A2.
I'll second.
George?
Aye.
Virginia?
Aye.
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 Aye, and I'm aye. 5-0. We are adjourned. It is 8:29.